Welcome to the Jali podcast. I'm your host, Melyssa Barrett. This podcast is for those who are interested in the conversation around equity, diversity, and inclusion. Each week, I'll be interviewing a guest who has something special to share or is actively part of building solutions in the space. Let's get started. Hey, friends, it's Melyssa here. It's Black History Month, so I thought this month might be the perfect time to incorporate some history that people may or may not be aware. I thought I would focus on organizations that have played a significant role in African American culture. And I know there are probably many organizations, but I thought I would kick it off with the first African American fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. They were the first African American Greek organization to organize on a college campus. They were the first of many that would follow. And many of you may hear people refer to the Divine Nine. These are 9 Black Greek letter organizations that make up the National Pan-Hellenic Council, which consists of 5 fraternity organizations and 4 sorority organizations. The history of Black Greek letter organizations starts back in the early 1900s when African American students were excluded from Greek organizations at primarily white institutions. So just to give you a little bit of history, and this will be really little because I just want to give you the order of those Divine 9 organizations. In order, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated was founded on December 4th, 1906, on the campus of Cornell University. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated was founded on January 15th, 1908, on the campus of Howard University. Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated was founded on January 5th, 1911, on the campus of Indiana University. Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated was founded on November 17th, 1911, on the campus of Howard University. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated was founded on January 13th, 1913, on the campus of Howard University. Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated was founded on January 9th, 1914, on the campus of Howard University. Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated was founded on January 16th, 1920, on the campus of Howard University. Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated was founded on November 12th, 1922, on the campus of Butler University. And Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated was founded on September 19th, 1963, on the campus of Morgan State University. Today, I'm going to be joined by one of the most wonderful people I've had the pleasure to know. I will make his introduction brief, but he is most humble and always working. Lonnie Holmes is a native of San Francisco, California, who graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School. He received a BA from the University of Washington and later went on to get his master's degree in public administration. Lonnie has spent over 25 years working in the law enforcement industry. He's currently a wage hour investigator for the U.S. Department of Labor. And prior to that, he was the San Francisco Juvenile Probation Department's Director of Community Services, overseeing alternatives to detention programs before retiring. This man is always doing something to leave his community better than the way he inherited it. And anytime I need him, he is always right there. I am so excited to be focusing on the Divine Nine for Black History Month. So I figured I would start with Alpha Phi Alpha. the original, I won't say the original, but certainly the first Black fraternity. And I have Lonnie Holmes here with me, who has been not only a friend of mine, I think for, gosh, maybe 30 some years.
Yeah, it's about right.
It's been a while, but you are deep. So I wanted to reach out to you and maybe have you tell us a little bit about the fraternity, how they got started, why they got started, and really kind of shed some light on the Divine Nine this month. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. No, thanks. Thanks for inviting me, Melyssa. Yeah, I have a pretty interesting story myself as it relates to the fraternity, but let me just start with the Seven Jewels, who are the founders of the fraternity that started at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. One of the reasons that these brothers got together, our founders specifically, our Jewel brothers, is because if you look at historically what has happened on campuses of white institutions, there hasn't been a lot of support for African Americans, right? In terms of success. Some of that has changed, obviously, today, but we still have some of the same challenges. But back then, it started out as a social club, brothers getting together for a common cause, and that is to achieve educationally. And so as a result, then the notion of establishing a fraternity, in this particular case, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, was erected. And it evolved from there. And so what we have is Alpha Phi Alpha is the largest Greek lettered African American fraternity in the world. And we're in probably most countries, definitely around the world. And so we're constantly expanding. But with that being said, I want to just kind of speed up to myself.
Yeah.
As a gentleman who came out of a primarily Black high school, going to a college campus, to play sports and what have you, there wasn't a whole lot of support, educationally speaking. Now, when I first arrived on the campus of San Francisco State, which was my first college campus, as an athlete, I quickly realized that, there were a handful of us around, but when you looked in the classroom, you may have maybe 2 or 3 individuals out of about 30 or 40, in some cases 50 individuals in the classroom. When I was approached as a first semester freshman, which is kind of an anomaly, right?
Yeah.
I said to myself, I realized then, that look, I really need to get some support. I need some brothers who can back me up, you know what I mean, and support me. And so that's kind of how my journey started. Now, I ended up, there was no college chapter at San Francisco State where I started my collegiate career at the time. And so there were some brothers who came from Stanford University who subsequently came to recruit myself and about 5 other brothers. Now, 2 of those brothers dropped, okay, and it was myself and my 3 line brothers who at the time I was a first semester freshman. They were all seniors, and so, which I was extremely proud of. And so, but what I soon realized is that, all my Sands, as they refer to, right, all my line brothers, they had all basically graduated. So I was essentially on campus by myself.
Oh, wow.
And so what I had to do was, and my goal was really, look, I needed to establish a chapter for brothers like me that are on campus here at San Francisco State. And so I did that. And so along the way, I ran into a bunch of hurdles, if you will, right? And part of the hurdles, some of the hurdles involved the administration of the provost office, in this case, the administration. And so the administration didn't really want to have any Greek lettered Black organizations recognized and solidified on campus. And so I was going through many, many, many hoops. Now, mind you, this is, and I would say probably, 10 years before that, right? The 70s, you had one of the start of the first African American ethnic studies program in the country that started at San Francisco State. And
Oh,
so you
wow.
would think, essentially 10 years later, it wouldn't be an issue, but it was an issue. And it just goes to show you that while, that battle was fought and won, there were still battles to be fought. And I fought that
Wow.
battle and I was able to establish a chapter, Zyro chapter at San Francisco State. Once I was able to bring some other brothers into the fold of the fraternity, in which I had seven or six or seven other brothers that we had pledged through Stanford University, who were actually San Francisco State students like myself. And so once we had the optimum number, which was 7 at the time, then we were able to establish our charter after we basically, jumped over all the hurdles that we had to go through. And so,
Wow.
and the rest is history. And so, and quite frankly, one of the hiccups during this extensive pledge process that I went through is that, and everything was done by snail mail. There weren't any cell phones and all this other kind of stuff. And they didn't have emails and all this other kind of stuff. And so essentially what happened was, I would say about almost halfway into the process, we got a letter back from the national office saying that I'm not allowed to pledge. And because I was a first semester freshman, which was basically right, but so just one of those things that happened, right? And so, but be that as it may, everybody, my line brothers was like, hey, if I can't continue on the process, we're all going to jump out. And so then there was an exemption granted for me from the national office. And so we were able to continue on that process until, obviously we cross those burning sands, as they say. And so with
Wow.
that, I'm kind of in the history books of Alpha Phi Alpha as a dual member or founding member, if you will, just in
Yes.
layman's terms, for Zyro chapter of San Francisco State.
Wow.
So that was many, many years ago. And I will tell you now, I'm going on my 44th year. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I was barely, out of high school, going through this process, and you can imagine. And so when I tell you this story because this is one of the things that helped shape my life, right? I've
Yes.
actually been alpha longer than I've been anything in my life, right? Longer than I've been married, longer than all this stuff, right? And
Yes.
so, but through that, I've had the opportunity to meet, so many prominent alpha men, Andrew Young, I've met, Norm Bryce. All these brothers, man, that are, prominent alpha men. I've had an opportunity to break bread in many cases with them and sit down and just kind of learn and what have you. And so also then when I ended up transferring to University of Washington, where I, essentially graduated from, and it's funny because as I've participated as a big brother and pledged individuals who have, come and gone through the fold of Alpha Phi Alpha, they have matriculated to various states. And then at least once a month, if not more, I get calls from someone who is in Texas or someone who's in New York or wherever that knows me because they knew some, you know what I mean? And so it's that kind of thing. So I've been around that long. And because I came in at such a young age, I've had an opportunity really to kind of not only to mesh with the older generation, but also the younger generation, right?
Wow.
And so I'm kind of unique in that
Well,
arena.
I knew you were unique, but I mean, and I knew you were like Mr. Alpha Phi Alpha, but this is all new to me. I'm amazed. I mean, I didn't know you were a founding member at San Francisco State and all of that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're definitely a charter member. And I'll tell you something. It was funny because when I would say, as soon as we crossed, we ended up establishing our own chapter. We then, my line brother's brother, who was actually came from New York, David Johnson, was over at UC Berkeley. Now, UC Berkeley had a chapter that had been, it was just celebrate their 100th year. However, that chapter had been inactive for a number of years. There was no brothers over on UC. I mean, it's just the way it is when you see college campuses, right?
Right.
You don't see that many brothers in there, right? And sisters either, for those you see more sisters than brothers. But anyway, the point simply was this: is that once he got there, my line brother Greg Hunt, and God rest his soul, he had passed away about 10 years ago now, maybe a little bit more. Um, he helped establish that chapter. And it had been for him. Then you had a whole, collection of a bunch of brothers who came from UC Berkeley. And so during that time, you had, chapters that obviously you had Black Family Day that was just an historic event at UC Davis's campus, the campus of UC Davis. You had San Jose State University, Epsilon Mu, which is we call the Empire down there. But those two chapters between Sacramento and San Jose had been kind of the mainstays, right? And then you start filling in the rest of the Bay Area, okay? Because you had New Chi, Xi Pi, we're talking about UOP, University of Pacific. You had Cal State Hayward, now it's Cal State East Bay, and then UC Berkeley, we had us, obviously San Francisco State, and then UC Berkeley, and then I can't mention before that in '78 you had Nu Sigma, which was started on Stanford University's campus, and so within probably about a 3 to 4 year span, you had Alpha Phi Alpha chapters on all the major campuses in the Bay Area. Okay, and that's been a challenge since that time, obviously, because of how things are happening now, right? Costs and so forth, and just the inability of these campuses to reach out to African American young males out of high school. Okay, and then the Bay Area is changing, obviously, with the tech industry and the cost of living and all these other kinds of things. And so it's that was kind of a rare time, if you will, a historic time in some respects as well. But anyway, that's kind of how that stuff happened.
So tell us a little bit about Alpha Phi Alpha and what they focus on, because I know a lot of, all the Divine Nine has a service component.
Yeah. So we have our national programs, and the national programs include, let's say, Project Alpha. Project Alpha is a program, and in fact, I used to do Project Alpha as a chapter president, the grad chapter president for Gamma Chi Lambda, which is a grad chapter in San Francisco. But that focused on primarily, providing kids with information around STDs, safe sex, personal hygiene, those kinds of things. So we had, I remember the last time I did it, we had Dr. Agee, who was a prominent urologist here in San Francisco. He came out, provided examples, and provided just everything. And it was just, matter of fact, it was on KGO and some of these other things. We had a lot of live coverage of those kinds of things. But these are like national programs that we do, right? In addition to, right, just some of the other stuff. Brothers Keepers program, and look after older members and stuff like that, and their family and wives and so forth that are widowed and what have you. We have a voteless people as a hopeless people, getting out and assisting people with voter registration, and really just trying to reiterate how important their vote is to get them to vote on certain initiatives that are going to be more beneficial for the African American population and people in of color in general. And then you have go to high school, go to college. Now, every year, incidentally, we have a nonprofit, which is the Alpha Phi Alpha Scholarship Fund. And so we give out scholarships to 7 or 8, just kind of depends on the interest. We have a balance of about around about 200,000, and we don't touch the principal. But with the interest, we generally use the interest to give out scholarships on interest every year. We've been doing that for about 30 years.
Wow.
And for deserving high school students. And a lot of it's not necessarily based on GPA, although GPA is a consideration, but we also look at individuals' economic background. If an individual is trying to go to school and they live in a low income area, come from a low income family, a lot of times what we do is we say, okay, fine, they can use as assistants, and so we generally give them once we get their class schedule, send them a check right on for about 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 in some cases. Okay.
Fantastic.
So yeah, so that's there. I mean, there's just so many different things that we do. You know, annual turkey giveaways. Just be there to assist when we can, how we can, given the fact that we can.
Yeah. Let's pause for a moment. We'll be right back. What do you think that the focus that you all have and have been doing since 1906, if I recall?
Yes. Yes.
What do you think it has meant to our culture, the African American culture?
Oh no, I think so one of the things in terms of we talking about cultural relevance and things of that particular nature, and you can see through social media and some of these other things, but I mean obviously all the Divine Nine are known for their historic step moves and all these other kinds of things, and there's well, not facsimile, but there's imaging of those variations of steps that are not only across the country but across the world in some cases, right?
Yep.
Especially now with the cultural icons that are utilized through social media and the various platforms and stuff. And so, but with that being said, and that's just primarily for the young folks, but really, if you look at the Divine Nine in totality, you're looking at individuals who have graduated from college, and in many cases have multiple degrees, graduate degrees, doctorate degrees, and they went on to become very, very successful individuals. For example, some of the first Black doctors and business people were in San Francisco, the Bay Area, were African American doctors. Dr. Collins, one of our founders, is one of the first Black doctors and dentists that serves the Bay Area. And so you have a lot of prominent alpha men, you have a lot of prominent Divine Nine members who have done some monumental things across the country. And if you really begin to look at a lot of these individuals who may be in prominent positions, I can almost guarantee you that they are affiliated with one of the Divine Nine organizations. Okay. And it's not by luck, but what it is just that you have folks who seek higher education and seek the betterment of men and women through various platforms and mediums by looking at educational endeavors that are going to allow them to advance the various causes and advance the necessary steps to help uplift the downtrodden and disenfranchised.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, what else do you want to talk about? Anything else? Because I mean, that's a whole lot.
So what I will say is that this prison pipeline, is something that I think everyone is really concerned about. When you have more African American males in prison than you do on college campuses, it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing. Now, listen, college is not for everyone, right? But at the same time, you have to look at doing something. Now, with the advent, obviously, of the internet, folks have been very successful not going to college, and that's perfectly fine, right? But at the same time, not everyone is going to be in a situation they can take advantage of the various platforms and the innovations of the internet. Some folks are going to have to get education by way of looking at some kind of a serious vocation so that they can advance themselves. And obviously, when you start looking at how much money you can make with a high school diploma versus that of a bachelor's degree, there's a significant difference. And then it goes up from there. If you have a master's degree or a doctorate degree, all those make a significant difference when you start talking about compensation for wages. The other thing is that when you start looking at, raising a family, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely costly. And, particularly if you're having, kids before marriage and these other kinds of things, the young folks are finding out the hard way. And then what you have is you have this perpetual cycle of poverty that, young folks are coming up in. And then all of a sudden they're subject to the street hustle and everything else, right? And it worked for some, but it doesn't work for most. And what happens with the majority, they end up in prison.
Yeah.
So, obviously, trying to, push this narrative that you have to get your education in order so that you can open up more avenues of opportunity for you, your family, and your children.
That's awesome. That's why, I mean, for me, my exposure to the Divine Nine and the Greeks were much later in life. I didn't have anybody in my family that followed this path. My mother being an immigrant from Panama.
Mm-hmm.
And, my dad ended up going to school in North Dakota from, Missouri. So, for him, he had a different path, but I tend to wonder if he was able to flow into a network like this or even have any support
Yeah.
whatsoever. What life would have been like. And he was an amazing man. But I am, the more I am involved with the Divine Nine, I just think there's so many people that don't quite understand what it
Mm-hmm.
truly has meant to the culture to have the type of focus, the network, the support,
Mm-hmm.
because
Absolutely.
it's truly a bond
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
you're creating, across
Yeah.
generations.
Absolutely. It's a lifetime bond. And I will tell you, for me, being one of nine children, no one, I was the first one in my family to ever go to college and and graduate from college, right? And so, I didn't have any, no one was like college. I mean, in those days, things were a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
And they're still different, but I mean, every generation has their ups and downs and what they kind of go through, right? And so, we look at how young people are affected now from a mental health perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And mental health is becoming a real public epidemic. And but if you realize and look and do kind of an analysis, a lot of young folks they can't necessarily handle a lot of pressure in this world right now. And one of the things that I heard that is attributed to is the information overload of the internet, right?
Yeah.
And so how to manage the internet, right? And so, and I look at that and I say to myself, but it's a real phenomenon. But at the same time, I'm looking like, well, wait a second, that versus, where are you gonna get your next meal from? If you grew up in a low income household, coming up on government cheese and everything else. It's like, well, man, when I'll be able to get some real meat or something, you know what I mean? Instead of eating this spam, so look, I mean, so the struggle's a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
I can even tell my kids some of these stuff, like, yeah, it goes in one ear and out the other ear, right? Because they'll never know what that time was because they didn't go through that time. And so each generation has their own struggles, their own time, because you have folks who are constantly looking at the educational trends and the analysis of how things are being navigated in and around the world, just from an information standpoint to help people cope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. It's such a necessary component. And I look back to 1906 and just go, what was going on at that time. And for these brothers to get together and say, you know what, we're gonna do this. I mean, the courage it probably took to do that at that time. Is
Extreme
pretty
amount of courage,
significant.
yeah.
Yeah,
And because one wrong move could cost you your life,
absolutely.
and wouldn't nobody do anything about it. Okay, if you're the wrong color and caught on the wrong side of the track, it was a wrap. And so, the interesting thing, if we look at, you know, police, violence against African Americans and how, and this has been studied for decades, right? And it's still the same. It's still the same. And so, but again, from an educational perspective, sometimes you have to turn the other cheek, sometimes, and then look at trying to, fight on the backside, right? Once you have enough evidentiary information to substantiate, what has happened to you, right? And then go through the courts. And so it's easier said than done, right? When you're right in the midst of this stuff. But we have so many examples of what has transpired. But at the same time, I think that making yourself target, whatever that means, in the eyes of some of these other folks who are probably in the wrong profession to begin with, but also they're of a different persuasion. They don't know how to interact with us. And that's not only in the workforce from a diversity standpoint, but that's also in the streets and anywhere that you essentially go, unless they've been exposed. And what I find that now, even more so down south, it's beginning to be a little bit more tolerant, right, to a certain extent, right, and there's more exposure with obviously with the advent of the cameras and things like that on cell phones and and all the other mediums that are used out there to record information and people in action doing various kinds of things. And you never know who sticks a camera in, and that's why you have to be extremely careful. And that's why, even being a criminal these days, right? Yeah, you think you got away with it right now, but there's so many cameras everywhere. They're going to be able to track you down relatively quickly in some cases. Very seldom. It may take some time, but with the advent of DNA and all these other kinds of things. And so crime doesn't pay. It may be in a short run, but eventually you're going to get got. But that's from everybody, whether it's from the enforcement perspective, you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing from an enforcement perspective, or if you are, engaging in some kind of, criminal activity, or whether it's white collar, blue collar, or whatever the case may be. There's, and then we talk about these things, right? But then you look at the former president, former vice president, the current president, looking at having confidential documents in their homes and all these other kinds of things and not knowing this and all this other kind of stuff. Now the spotlight is coming out on this all of a sudden. So it's like, no matter where you turn, no matter where you look, someone's been exposed for something. So get that education, just walk the straight and narrow, man. That way you don't have to worry about looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. Well, you are doing some fabulous work, as you always have. So I so much appreciate
I'm my best. I'm not perfect.
None of us are perfect, but it's like you are always doing something. And I know how long you have been in San Francisco, and you are, what you have put into young men, young women behind you is just amazing. Yeah. So I know I know how much you fill me up, so I can't imagine, how many people you and your family have touched over the years. So thank you for all you do.
Yeah, and that's because people well, no, thank you, Melyssa. And that's because people have done that for us. I mean, listen, there were times where, coming from a big family, man, and not having much, and folks, delivered. Folks bought us turkeys, folks bought us. So everything that happened to me growing up, by way of, a handout and stuff like that, I've done the same thing and given back, because that was the message that was given to me. So I just try to do the same thing,
Yeah, pay it forward. Pay it forward. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the Jali podcast. The Jali, you knew him personally. So, this is a head nod to him. I know he would love to be able to connect with the Divine Nine. But it is truly a pleasure to have you join me.
Yeah, well, listen, let me just say this to you with all sincerity. I mean, your due diligence and persistence and really, getting the word out to young folks has been second to none. And I applaud you. We love you. And anytime that we can assist you, then, just feel free to, call us and then we, and I would say text, right? But I'm not a big tech guy, right? Can you just pick up the phone and call me? Because, it may be a couple of before I answer a text, right? but nowadays, with even my kids, they send text before they pick up the phone and call you, and I get it,
Right, exactly. Well, I love you back. I love y'all, and I appreciate you so much. So thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for joining me on the Jali podcast. Please subscribe so you won't miss an episode. See you next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.